counterpunk. Hello, Deke, magazine college student types. In your most recent issue, Mr. Ian Clemente wrote an article about his first trip to the Mr. Roboto project in Wilkinsburg. His reactionary article about the show space is in many ways typical of the reaction of someone who is quite obviously on the outside looking in. The shows that take place at Roboto attract, for the most part, a very specific and somewhat small audience. While the space does see itself as a place for all sorts of bands to play, and often lives up to this ideal, many shows are of the hardcore punk variety, with a tendency toward the more underground strains of hardcore playing the most often. In other words, while bands like Rapture, Radio 4, and the Scene Creamers have played Roboto, more often than not, a band like Crucial Unit, Tragedy, or The Cursed will be on the bill for any given night. Since the audience for these sorts of bands is not terribly large, again, more often than not, the same 10 to 30 people show up for many of the shows, though sometimes attendance is well over 100, the space maximum occupancy being somewhere near 150 people. So it should be no wonder to Mr. Clemente that all of these people at the Born Dead Icon show were so friendly to each other, but not to him. They, and I was not at this show, but I can't say who, and I probably wouldn't name names even if I could, are all friends and probably know each other fairly well. It is not hard for me to understand that someone might be intimidated or feel uncomfortable in a place where everyone seems to know each other, and everyone else is a friend. The fact that Roboto's crowd and the music scene in general seems to be fairly insular does not help to ease this discomfort, but it does help to say hello to people at shows and say, "Hey, I'm Ian, I've never been here before." Writing as a semi-outsider, semi-insider, I'd say that this could get a couple of reactions based on what Mr. Clemente might have said. He probably seemed like a tourist, and his article shows off his tourist status. He has no interest in the scene or this type of music aside from the 10 minutes in high school where he probably liked Rancid or Operation Ivy. My guess is that he didn't talk to anyone, or if he did, it was some sort of awkward, timid hello that was instantly forgotten. Mr. Clemente's review of the show seems trite and uninformed. It seems to me that he's probably not into hardcore, and if he is, he likes really shitty bands whose records are available at most department stores and other purveyors of your rape culture. Clemente keeps bringing up melody and songwriting in his article. Perhaps songwriting isn't something to take issue with, since a lot of hardcore these days is pretty generic. But what marks him as an outsider is probably the fact that he refers to a circle pit as dancing in a circle and talks about the repetition of gestures as if being on cue. Well, fuck you, Ian. It's a form of socialization, and yes, it is a ritual, and yes, it has its problems, and even if you got it for 1 second, I'd be fine with you making comments like that. But you don't get it, and this article shows that you don't get it. Why were you even at this show? Did you read in the city paper that Roboto was cool, and that your college student who has never been to a real punk show in his life chose some randomly picked show? Of course, every band said no when you asked them to use Deke as a platform. Their reaction was probably something like, "Who the fuck is this lame kid?" Okay, more invectives. Do you even know how acronyms work? The band Suburban Death Machine could be abbreviated SDM. I have no clue what SMD is. Also, whoever worked the mixing board so poorly that placing the emphasis on volume that any political message was drawn on monotonous thrashing. If you don't like monotonous thrashing, then you have no business being at a thrash show. Also, the person working the mixing boards, by the way, most places only have one board, is most likely a member of the Roboto board and not some sound specialist, so if you want a sound man, stay at Laga. After reading Ian's article, I thought, well, maybe I should email this dork and take him to a show. But after reading it again, I just can't help but side with all the other people I know who read this thing and said, "This kid sucks." I don't speak for Roboto, and frankly, I don't care if you come to shows or not, but I think your article is just really shitty. Do some research before you write about something that's totally alien to you, and it helps if you ask someone for a ride instead of hoping they live up to some sort of preconceived ideal you have that punk rockers are telepaths. Counterpunk. I appreciate and respect your feedback, to some extent, Michael. Editor's note, Michael Siciliano. What you criticize me for, though, is equally uninformed. You make several presumptuous suppositions about me and base a large portion of your letter on doing so. How many times do you use the word probably? 5. This doesn't include the other half steps and disqualifiers such as seems and most likely and I guess. I make assertions in my article based on what I saw, which from the local bands wasn't much of anything, and from the audience was confrontational posturing. You may reread the section in which someone refers to Fraction as a dancey pop band. You yourself dismiss anything you don't personally endorse as shitty bands whose records are available in those department stores as purveyors of your rape culture. All your letter does is further prove my point. I knew that I'd offend the Roboto contingent by not praising anyone as heroes of the left. I've attended numerous venues in the Pittsburgh area over many years, and no one has been less than accommodating whether I had questions or was just there to watch. One point I'll admit I balked on was the car ride. It was added mostly for drama, but in all truth, local bands who I've never met before have been so thankful for the support they received that they've actually approached people afterwards, including me. It's unfair of me to impose this camaraderie onto anyone. Why shouldn't I hold punk rockers to some sort of preconceived ideal, though, when they've so eagerly fulfilled every other one? You, however, attack me for even attending. Why? Because I don't fit in with your crowd? Exactly. Maybe look beyond your defenses and understand that I plain don't like it. Is a little professionalism too much to ask? That was my problem with the sound, too, to which you reply, stay at Laga. Fine, I see your point. Roboto isn't a professional venue. It's a gathering for friends and like-minded individuals to dance around in a circle. In that case, don't advertise it as a venue open to the public. Remain cut off in your clubhouse. Remain elitist. Remain superioristic snobs. My comment in regards to repetition of gestures as being on cue refers to your formula for acting at a show. As you so ineloquently observe, I didn't research the proper title for your rituals, and this is your beef, that I don't fit into your own preconceptions. That's what I was trying to say. That what's the point of music if you don't want to share it or make any remote attempt to do so? What's the gratification found in hoarding music, holding it, and lording it over others? The fact that they don't like what they don't like is as underground as what you like. What does that prove? What did your letter prove? Nothing new. Nothing has changed. You make assumptions based on a type you created an attempt to mold me into. You make me into the classic enemy, creating, in this case, a completely inaccurate representation of me because I don't agree with your ethos in the same way that generic hardcore hides behind politics. You refer to everyone as college student types, admitting unintentionally your predisposition. What exactly is that type? Michael Lewis Siciliano, film studies major at the University of Pittsburgh, employee at Hillman Library. I can make assumptions based on what I've seen so far, which is more than you know of me. But instead, I want to point out where you make grossly incorrect judgments. In reality, I went to the show not because I had some starry-eyed notions about togetherness, but because Deke sent me there on assignment. The way I acted differed in no way from my usual demeanor. I explained that I was with Deke and I had a few questions about the show. It was my normal, outgoing, persistent self, especially with Ian Ryan, who noted was very polite in handling inquiries. I gave everyone ample opportunity, but the only band who felt I was worth their time was La Fraction. If everyone else really thought, who the fuck is this lame kid, then that's their problem, and I know that supports my point, once again, that Roboto is comprised of a bunch of people who absolutely need to separate themselves and make others feel inadequate. You'll notice the correct initials above when referring to SDM. That's an abbreviation, not an acronym. A mistake to which I'll admit. It's sloppy journalism concerned more with the big picture than with details. One part of the article I will not take the blame for is reference to thrashing. The editor, Deke, added that unbeknownst to me until publication. Understand that unless the editor's name is signed to an article, it could be filtered or altered. In your second sentence, you refer to me as reactionary. Did you mean to categorize me as a member of the extreme right wing? In that case, did you read the accompanying bio, apolitical? This means I'm sick of having agendas forced upon me and being vilified for not complying. Did you mean that simply I was lashing out, perhaps irrationally? I wrote a tempered article and made no claim to authority or objectivity. Although those sections where I spelled that out were deleted, the core ideas of the article remain my own. You, in return, Michael, define reactionary with your blind, foaming piece littered with conjecture and overarching generalization. One assertion you make is about my history with punk rock. I was actually born and raised in Pittsburgh in a local music scene embroiled with hardcore as well as really shitty bands. That's where I formed my notions about punk rock. I thought that once I got into the city permanently, it might be different, completely different from the suburbs, but it isn't. Punk rock turned into a joke. This includes Operation Ivy and Rancid, who I never really cared for anyway. The point is that I shouldn't even have to defend that point. Music is designed to bring people together, not claim territory. My article states that not all hardcore acts, and not even all the bands playing that night, were playing uninteresting amelodic excuses for songs, and that I like Fraction and Born Dead Icons a lot. They're the reason their international acts and SDM and Aphasia haven't even been noticed anywhere outside of the Pittsburgh punk contingent. Apparently that very status is desirable. I don't feel it's improper to look at art as just that, removing the political overtones. Your letter did nothing but display your own bias and agenda. You spit at me because I don't share your personal view. But beyond that, you have few legitimate complaints. You threw in my face an unoriginal, unintelligent, and uninteresting example of how you're programmed, face it, you are, differently than me. The only message I took away from this is, no, really, you were right. Roboto doesn't want anyone to come. They should close their doors to the public then, because taking me to a show won't cure anything. I have my mindset, and you certainly have yours, which as early as your title, you made clear. There is no revolution.